Welcome back to the Cart Barn podcast. We're very excited to have today's guest joining us, a figure that most people are going to recognize. He's a winner of the 1974 U.S. Amateur, the 1976 U.S. Open, and he made a really big splash, figuratively and literally, at the 1982 Players Championship at Sawgrass, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But today's guest is Jerry Pate. Jerry, welcome to the Cart Barn podcast.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you, Greg.
Nice to have you with us today, Jerry. It's an honor to be speaking with you about all things golf.
Well, I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say also and your questions.
Well, Jerry, if we could, let's just kind of go back to the early days for a few minutes. How did you grow? How did you kind of get involved in the game, and where were you playing then? A little bit about your early junior days.
Well, I was born in Macon, Georgia. My dad was a good golfer. He had played golf at the University of Georgia. My grandfather was a good player as well. And he grew up in South Georgia near Sandersville, and he went to Georgia Business College around 1920. His roommate was one of uh, the original players at Augusta National at the Masters, and Horton Smith was also a really fine golfer. But anyway, my granddaddy would travel around Georgia and play, and my dad learned how to play. He grew up in Jacksonville at Ponte Vedra Club. My granddaddy was the original member there in the 30s. And so golf was in our family. I was one of six kids. I was a fourth of six, and we moved to Anniston, Alabama, 1954, when I was 1 year old. So I grew up at Anniston Country Club. My dad later went to work at Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola Bottling Group was headquartered in Anniston and in Pensacola, Florida. And so I moved when I was 13 to Pensacola, and that's when I think I got a little bit better in golf. But as a kid, I always hung out at the golf course in the summer and played a lot of junior golf around the state of Alabama. Was not very good, didn't win many tournaments. Really, as a junior, once I moved to Pensacola, won some local tournaments, but and it wasn't a lot of competition. But I wasn't like the future Masters winner. I didn't play in the United States Junior Amateur Championship. I didn't play in a state junior. I only played in one state amateur, and I was 20 years old, and I was basically my arm got twisted by Andy Bean, a University of Florida player who convinced me to go down and stay with him in Lakeland, Florida, and play the Florida Amateur. That was my first really big time tournament, and I won it. Of course, I went to Alabama along with Conrad Railing. He was at Florida. Then he went to Pensacola, and he started teaching me when I was about 15 at University of West Florida. And my dad said, well, you might want to stick with him. I traveled around and visited some schools, University of Georgia. My dad was an alumni and a golf alumni team member. They said, no, you're not good enough to get a scholarship. So I actually walked on at Alabama in 1971, and Conrad was hired by Coach Bryant, who was the athletic director. So it was kind of a God thing. Coach was real involved with the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. I was a pretty wild kid, and he kept telling me you need to get more involved in the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. And I thought, well, he'd lost his mind. I'm going to come up here and party and be in fraternity and study business, and eventually go to work for my dad in the Coca-Cola business. But I never dreamed I'd be on the PGA Tour. That just was never a thought.
Wow.
When you look back at your days in Anniston, what was the attraction of golf over, say, baseball or football, or at that time? Because football in Alabama in the South is king. What kind of steered you to golf that you really fell in love with it?
Well, I played basketball and I played football. I was a pretty good athlete, but I was such a strong. I don't know if it was ADD. People used to ask me, was I ADD? I said, no, when I was in junior high, I became non-ADD when I was fooling around in the shower, sliding down the showers in Pensacola and with another friend. And the coach caught us and he gave us two licks with no towel around our butt. And that was the end of me having ADD. It was. And people asked me in interviews, did you take Ritalin? I said, they didn't even have Ritalin. I took wooden Ritalin. It was a wooden paddle on your butt, and that straightened kids out. But I was a really active kid. So when I played basketball and football in Anniston, I was kind of a skinny kid. I thought I was a good athlete. I was always good at shooting pool, ping pong, basketball, free throws. But I wasn't the guy. And I like to get under the basket and rough it up. And I played tight end. I played wide receiver. and I didn't mind hitting people. In fact, I got thrown out of a football game at Saxe, Alabama, in about 1966. One of my best friends, who became a county commissioner, Robert Downing, intercepted a ball, ran for a touchdown. In those days, the coach would tell you to put the headgear right here on him. You just hit him there. And so he had intercepted. We were running around the end for a touchdown. Here comes the quarterback, and I laid him out, knocked him out, hit him right in the sternum. And of course, in those days, people didn't worry about kids breaking their neck. You just hit them with your helmet. And of course, the coach came running out, told the referees that I had slugged him, and I didn't slug him. I just hit him just like I was taught. And that was kind of the end of my football career when I knocked the kid out. They threw me out of the game, and I called the touchdown back. And I still tease with my good friend Robert Downing to this day about how he had scored the interception touchdown, about a 60-yard run back, and uh, it got taken back. But I was really a good athlete, but I was not a big kid. I was always skinny, and went to school. I was almost 6 foot, 130 pounds, and I kept starting to think that I was not going to get much better in golf. But we played basketball at Alabama in the bottom gym at Coleman Coliseum. We played over at the Ferguson gym, and not the Ferguson, but the old gym. I can't even remember the name of it. It's the ladies' gym now for the basketball. But we played flag football, so I was very active. But it wasn't about to my sophomore year I started getting a little stronger. I love to water ski. I think that got me stronger. We lifted a little bit of weights, but not much. The only weights we lifted were, Budweisers from here to there. We called 6-ounce curls. And my coach kept saying, you need to get involved with the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. It's going to change your life. And of course, I didn't until I was probably in my 30s. But Conrad Railing turned my life around and my career around. And really, Andy Bean did. God bless him. He died of lung failure from COVID, and had a double lung transplant about a year ago. And God bless Andy, passed away. He was a great player. He was a great junior. He won everything, and he was a star at Florida. Of course, Alabama had to play in the SEC events, and I became number one player at Alabama, even though I wasn't very, very good. But I would play with the best players from Georgia and Florida and Tennessee and the other schools, LSU. So I got to meet a lot of good players. But when Andy invited me to go to the Florida Amateur and I won it down in Greenleaf, that kind of turned my whole thinking around, that maybe I was good enough to play with the best players in America. And so Andy said, let's go to Jacksonville. We'll stay at your grandparents, try to qualify for the U.S. Amateur. And this was in the summer of '74. And I'd never played in the U.S. Amateur or U.S. Juniors. And we go there. I win the medalist and ironically, I won at San Jose Club, which I didn't know at that time. My grandfather was a founding member about 1926 or 28. And he had left San Jose and gone out to Ponte Vedra, to the beach, to the Ponte Vedra Club, which is a great, great golf club. And so I went to New Jersey, and there were 8 matches, and I won all 8 matches. And a couple of them I should have lost, and by fate having it, I just ended up winning by hitting some incredibly remarkable, lucky shots. And that's history. You never know. I mean, it kind of excites me to think about it.
And in those 8 matches, was there anybody, any name recognizable people that you beat on the way to that championship?
I hate to tell you, every one of them. I was the guy that everybody beat up on. I was put in the group that was supposed to lose the first match. I played Laura Ball, who was a famous golfer's brother, Bo Ball, who was at San Jose State. He was a big Pac-12 player. Beat him. I beat Bob Young at Georgia, who was one of their better players. Bob was a scholarship athlete. I beat Keith Ferguson, who was an All-American from Houston. Keith played the tour. All these guys played on the PGA Tour. Later, I beat Keith. Then I got paired against Ed Tutwiler, who was probably one of the best amateurs in the history of the game, from Indianapolis. Beat him. Then I got paired against Bill Campbell, who won a U.S. Amateur. Bill was president of the USGA. He had played in some crazy number, like 25 U.S. Amateurs. And then I beat George Burns, who was ranked number one. George was from Maryland, and he lived in New York on Long Island. He was the number one ranked player in that amateur. Had won the Met Amateur and won all kind of famous amateur tournaments. And then I played Curtis Strange, who was ranked number one at Wake Forest, won the NCAA the year before. And then I played John Grace, who was really an unknown from Fort Worth, Texas. But John was a fine amateur. Had played at University of Houston along with John Mahaffey. The irony of that is I beat John Grace in the U.S. Amateur, whose wife's name was Susan. My wife's name was Susan. I beat John Mahaffey 2 years later in the U.S. Open, who was John Grace's teammate. I beat the two Johns, and his wife's name was Susan, and both of them played on the golf team together at University of Houston. So all this kind of was sort of destiny. If you put all these names and people together, I was an unknown, and my quote when I won was, well, the greatest story of the whole deal was I get to the finals, and my dad said, take a shirt. He calls me up and says, wear an extra shirt. It's 36-hole match. It's a long day. You're going to get hot and sweaty. Conrad Rayling flew up from Alabama to watch me play the finals. And the morning match, I was one down after 18. I go in the locker room to change shirts, and the locker room attendant now is the only person in the locker room. Everybody's been beaten other than John Grace and I. And he says, here's a telegram. And I read it, and it says, I hope all your putts drop. Win one for Alabama. We're pulling for you. It says Paul and Mary Harmon Bryant. So I got a telegram from Coach Bryant. I folded it up, put it in my bag, and kind of got it in my bag as good luck, because Coach Bryant was kind of a superstitious guy, and I was a little bit too. And I walk out on the first tee of this afternoon. I'm one down. I think I knocked it out of bounds on one and lost that hole, and I might have even lost two. So I was at least 2 or 3 down with only 15 to play. As fate would have it, I ended up winning 2 up and beating John Mahaffey. So when I get in the press room afterwards, it's late Saturday afternoon, and they're going to telecast a delayed telecast on Sunday with ABC Sports. And so they asked me, was there anything I wanted to talk about that we don't know? I said, yeah. And I pulled this telegram out. It's a telegram from Coach Paul Bear Bryant. And they go, oh my God. And so we're in New York City, basically. We're across the river from the George Washington Bridge, and all the international and national writers are there. And the headlines of the paper was not Jerry Pate won the U.S. Amateur, because I was an unknown. It was another national championship for the Bear. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, I just won the U.S. Amateur. So I get back to school I fly home on Saturday night. I get home Saturday night. I'm home Sunday. I drive back up to Tuscaloosa. School's already started. And I get a phone call from my coach, and he says, get your butt up to the athletic department. Coach Bryant wants to see you. So it's made all the international and national papers, and Coach Bryant with more publicity. So he says, I want you, and he says, I want you to go eat on the training table. You can go to the football game with me next week in Birmingham, and I want you to come to practice. You must be lucky if you won the U.S. Amateur Championship. And I said, well, what time is practice? He said 3:30. Be out there at practice. I said, Coach, we have golf practice 3:30. He looked at me. He said, I want you out there at 3:30. So of course, me and my wisdom, and I'm talking to everybody on campus that I knew. Well, I went to the golf course. I'm with all my golf team members. They can't believe it. It's so surreal. I've never won anything in here. I won the Florida Amateur and came right back and won the U.S. Amateur. And Coach Brian, I show up late, and one of the trainers tells me, oh my God, you're in trouble. Coach Bryant's looking for you. So I run out to the middle of the field with him, and I'm getting in front of the big spiral tower, and he looks at me and he says, come on up. So I walked up those stairs, and anytime my senior year or when he was alive, I went to practice. If I wanted to go in that tower, I could go in the tower with him. He kind of treated me special. And the other thing was that when I left his office, he said, I want you to check earlier that morning, check out the marquee on the Coliseum. I didn't even know what a marquee was, much less I ever saw it. And that's where they would promote the upcoming basketball or football games. And it said, congratulations, Jerry Pate, U.S. Amateur champ. And it stayed on there, most of the fall season. So he basically took me from the fraternity house and a senior who was going to go study business and be a Coca-Cola bottler to now a known amateur golfer in the country and around the state. And I went to practice that day. You never forget things. He had this big megaphone, and while I'm talking to him and he's talking to me, he's asked me all these questions and I'm answering him. He hollers out, "That away, Ozzie, good catch!" And he claps his hand, put the microphone down. He's got his big hands. He said, that boy's going to be a hell of a football player. Ozzie Newsome was a freshman. Is that crazy? And he went on to be a 4-time, I think, All-American and All-Pro about 100 times, literally 10 times. And then he was the first African-American to win a Super Bowl as a manager of the Cleveland Browns in the NFL. So he broke the color barriers, not only at Alabama, but he did in NFL.
That's awesome. Have you still got the telegram from Coach Bryant?
I still have it. I sure do. Yep.
Awesome.
And it's a yellow Western Union telegram. It's in a scrapbook. But who would have thought that I won that, and then I went to the World Amateur that fall. I won that. I went to the Ohio State tournament in Columbus, which was a preview for the NC2A. It was Jack Nicklaus's famous school, Ohio State, and we played the Scarlet course, which was a Donald Ross course. Everything, all the stars were aligning. I won that tournament. Then I won several that spring. And I got invited to play at the Jacksonville Open because my mom and dad were from Jacksonville. My grandfather was a known golfer in Jacksonville. So I go to Deerwood before they had the TPC, way before that, and they didn't. The Players Championship the next 2 years later became the Players at Sawgrass before we moved to the TPC, built the TPC Sawgrass in '82. And of course, all this stuff is just fate. It has nothing to do with me. It's just kind of I happen to be in the way of what God wanted, and He put me in this path. But so I go to Jacksonville. I never played in a pro tournament. I used to watch the Pensacola Open in Pensacola, and caddied as a kid. Knew a little bit about pro golf, and I'm teeing off on Sunday, and Arnold Palmer's leading, and I'm in second. And here I am, a senior in Alabama, playing in a pro tournament. Nobody knows me from a yo-yo, and I'm down there. Got a shot at winning the Jacksonville Open, my first pro tournament ever. And no telling if I'd have won it, because I'd have been automatically exempted. I would have immediately quit school and gone on the tour. Shot 75 or whatever. I go to Hilton Head and make the cut. Go to the Masters. I'm a runner-up low amateur. I make the cut there, and I go to Pensacola Open. So I'm playing 4 weeks in a row that spring. I'm not in school, not even going to class. I'm now celebrity Alabama golfer, and I almost win in Pensacola. I finished sixth there, and ironically, Jerry McGee won. And I'll never forget this story. Jill McGee's holding this little baby who is Mike McGee, who Mike McGee today is married to Annika Sorensen. And I love to tell Annika and Mike the story about when he was a little baby and his daddy had just won the Pensacola Open and I was the low amateur. Go back to college, finish second at the NC2A, go to the Walker Cup, turn pro, and didn't play too well, made a couple of cuts over in Europe, came back, went to the tour qualifying school, and I'm thinking, oh my, and I'm getting ready to get married like the week after. And I'm thinking, if I lost my mind, I haven't finished school, I don't have a degree, so I can't get hired by Coca-Cola, and my business degree is going down the drain. And I'm going to try to be a golfer. And I've only been doing this really at a high level for about a year, maybe a year and a half. I never was in the limelight before that in golf. And so I go to the qualifying school at Walt Disney. Again, I'm paired with Andy Bean in the finals. Well, a crazy story about that is I double bogey the first hole I play, and there's 620 people, and I'm getting ready to get married, and I'm walking off the second hole, which is number to the second hole, number 11 at the Magnolia course. Never forget it. And about in tears. And there's my wife walking to be my fiance. She's out watching me, and I just said, you can't quit. And I ended up winning. So
Wow.
who knows? But you double bogey and you want to just quit and go back in and say, man, I better get back to school and get my college degree. But I won the qualifying school, which put me on the PGA Tour, and that's a whole life of that story. But that's kind of my golf career. I played pretty well my first year I started out. I didn't qualify you had to qualify on Mondays in those days. I go to Tucson. I'm renting a car from Sonny King Ford in Anniston, Alabama. I don't even own a car. Just been married. Borrowed money from my dad's boss, $30,000, what it took. Had to sign a note. Paid the doc stamps on it. Head out to Phoenix, Arizona, to Tucson, and I don't qualify on Monday, so I'm not in the event. I drive to Phoenix, which is the second event, and I meet the pro there, and he plays golf with me and then says, why don't you play with the head of the Thunderbirds at the Phoenix Open and maybe he'll give you a sponsor exemption. They had 8 sponsor exemptions to every tournament. And so he said, well, listen, if my Arizona boys make the cut in Tucson, well, you're going to get in. So I got in Phoenix and I finished probably in the top 20, 18 to 20, made $3,250. And I thought I was rich. And we drove to Pebble Beach, made the cut, played the West Coast, came back, had a caddy driving from West Coast to East in the car. We at least got to fly home. Flying in the back of the airplane, didn't have any money on Eastern Airlines. And lo and behold, I win the U.S. Open halfway through the season and come right back and win the Canadian Open. So in my first year, I ended up becoming Rookie of the Year and Co-Player of the Year. Started my second year, and it's the Phoenix Open is the first tournament of the year, and I won it right out of the box. So, it was obvious that I could play a little bit, and played pretty well for about 7.5 years. And right after winning the Players Championship and jumping in the lake, throwing the commissioner and Pete Dye in the lake, I tore my left shoulder on hitting some balls on some hard ground. And I had an arthroscopy of the left shoulder joint by Dr. Andrews in Columbus, Georgia, at the Houston Clinic, and before he came to Birmingham. And I'd already known Jim. I'd played with Jim in the Pro-Am at Green Island in Columbus, Georgia. I won it in 77 to 78 back to back. So I knew Jim, and he was a good friend. And finally, my shoulder didn't get better after tearing it in 82. So he did a scope on it in 85 and 86, didn't get better. Went to Frank Jobe in LA, who was a big West Coast doctor, cut me from stem to stern. And that was sort of the end of my career. And I had a 10-year exemption. So I could have played 10 years anywhere I wanted to play. And I pretty much hung up my clubs, and I went to work for ABC Sports in 1988 as a commentator.
Well, what a story.
It
I
was
want
a
to go.
quick 7. It was a quick 7 years. I'll tell you, 6.5 years.
Yeah.
When I go back and think about it, I never looked at my record, never knew what I had done, never did it for the money. I just loved to win, or I loved to beat people. I loved to compete. I was really competitive. I grew up one of 6 kids and had great parents, and my parents were competitive. College degrees, my mom was tops in her class in art and design and studied. I studied music as a kid. I took art. I took architecture as a kid. Studied business as a kid because you wanted to do what your parents wanted you to be and do and make your parents proud. But I was one of 6 kids, all very competitive. In fact, my younger sister Nancy was captain of the tennis team at Alabama for 3 straight years, and I think she won about as many matches. She never played number 1 at Alabama. She always was put number 2. In fact, she was going to turn pro after she got out of college, but she went to work for Chubb Insurance. She majored in business and ended up running Chubb Insurance out of the California office. She ran the West Coast. She ran Alabama, Georgia, and Florida, or Alabama, Mississippi, and Florida out of the Tampa office before she died of leukemia when she was 55 years old. But she was a really fine athlete as well. And all my brothers and sisters were good athletes, but I was just a lucky one. It was just a God thing.
I was gonna say
What was it? Go ahead, Greg.
yeah, no, what do you feel like puts you over the top?
Yeah.
Because I mean, there's thousands of people who aspire to be on the PGA Tour, and just that small percentage actually can do it and be successful at it.
Well, it's hard to, it's a fine line. And I tell people being at the top is tough. People think, boy, I wish I could be there. It's like a pyramid. If you're on top of that pyramid, number one, it's a slippery slope coming down. The higher you get, there's not much oxygen up there. You have a lot less friends that are true friends in golf because everybody's trying to knock you off the top of the hill. I asked Lee Trevino after my first year, I said, am I doing something wrong out here? He said, what are you talking about, Bubba? I said, well, the guys I went to college with are out here hardly speak to me. He said, well, you're playing with me and you're playing with Jack and Arnold and Ray Floyd and Tom Watson, and they're still trying to make the cut. And they're just happy to get your card. You've got a 10-year exemption. You won the U.S. Open, blah, blah, blah. You were player of the year. He said, if you want them to like you, he said, just shoot 75 and miss the cut and go to dinner on Friday night and cry about how bad you played on Friday, and everybody will be your buddy. He said, he told me, he said, you've got a big family and they love you. He said, these people try to kick your butt and your job is to kick your butt. I told the same story to Tiger Woods on the practice tee at Fort Worth, Texas, his rookie year. I think it was 95. And Tiger had won his college tournament. Maybe it was after 95. It might have been about 98. I think he won his college tournament. One of his first was the Jerry Pate Intercollegiate at Shoal Creek, playing with Nota Begay and Casey Martin. Had a great team. He won the NCAA that year. But when Tiger came on the tour, he won the Byron Nelson, and they asked him how he played. He said, well, I played okay. I kind of had my B game. Oh, my God, the players the next week in the locker room were going crazy. How this young rookie could come out and said he had his B game and beat them. And I'm not going to tell you the names. These are three noted young guys younger than I. And I said, listen, just get ready because he's going to kick your butt every week. And he did. He's, Jack Nicklaus, the all-time greatest player. So I went on the back end of the range at Fort Worth, and nobody would talk to Tiger. So he went to the other end of the range to hit balls, and I knew him because he had won my tournament. In fact, it was at Shoal Creek, and he had to deal with some of the old racial connotations left over from the 90 PGA when he came there in 95. I had to hold a press conference, and I was the host of the press conference with Tiger Woods and Hall Thompson, Mr. Thompson, who was unfairly judged over that whole situation, who built Shoal Creek. Tiger handled it well and went on to win the tournament, but moved forward. Now he's on the PGA Tour. I think it's 2 years later, 3 years later. And I told him the same story, and he just smiled. I said, don't worry about if these guys like you or not. I said, your job is to kick their butt every week. And when I finally figured out in college, you asked me what turn the cube. It's like the Rubik's Cube. I can remember my brother gave me one when I went to the Players Championship in '82, and I had not won a tournament in 2 years. No, actually, I take that back. I had one when I won at Memphis. I hadn't won one in 2 years, '81, but I hadn't won a big tournament in a couple of years. I'd won the Pensacola, I'd won the Memphis Open, and I played on the Ryder Cup, and we won. I got beat, a couple of shots. I think Andy Bean beat me a shot, maybe at Doral right before the Players. But he gave me this Rubik's Cube, and I kind of related it to golf. When I learned how to play the game, is when I could put all the colors in the right side, and it just your brain just clicks, and you go, you know what? I'm 60 yards from the hole. I'm going to get this ball up and down. And that is where the game takes place. It's not driving the ball. Anybody can drive it long today, and anybody can hit the greens. But you watch Scotty Scheffler. I didn't see it yesterday. I had some other thing. I played golf with my grandson, who's about to go to St. Andrews University. He's a smart kid and was lucky to get in. So he wanted to play golf yesterday afternoon. I played with my grandson and my daughter, which I don't even play much golf anymore. But Scotty Scheffler made some double bogeys and boom, came right back, birdie, par, birdie, birdie. I mean, the guy, once you get to that level, when you make a mistake and make a bogey or double bogey, you have to come back. And when I played the qualifying school, and I just told you the story, I double bogeyed the 10th hole at Disney right out of the chute. I'm probably ranked number one in the school out of 600 and some odd people. And it's going to narrow down to 20 people are going to get their card. And I mean, I was like in tears walking the second hole, self-doubting, self-talk. You're the dumbest guy. You didn't get your degree. You're going to get married. You don't have any money. You don't even own a car. You borrowed your brother's car to drive down there. And you know what happened on the second hole? I made a birdie. And that's what you have to do. You have to put loss behind you. You have to forget your bad. You have to learn from your mistakes, but you have to move forward. And so that was what turned my game around. And I've seen so many really good players, kids, that they make a bogey or a double bogey. I mean, I shot 65s, double bogey in the first hole, or six. I think I shot 69 that day at Disney, which was set up hard in those days. I mean, people didn't shoot the 63 fours and fives when I played, just because the golf courses weren't in that good a shape. You couldn't make that many putts. Some of the greens would have bare spots on them, and so you have to forget your losses and your mistakes, but you learn from them. You always move forward. That's old news and that's old baggage. So that's the key to anybody that wins in golf. It's a single-minded sport that you have to be able to have fun while you're doing it, but you have to be able to focus in that split second of 5 or 6 seconds when you have to hit each shot.
Wow, what a great insight there as to playing golf.
When you got out there and you're playing alongside Trevino and Nicklaus and Watson, were you intimidated? Was there an adjustment period to being around those guys? I mean, because they were probably your idols. Arnold Palmer was probably your idol, one of your idols growing up.
Arnold was my idol growing up, but Arnold at that time was almost 50, so he was not really in the mix. Jack was the guy. Trevino was the guy. There were a lot. I mean, you think about the guys I played up against, even the guys on my Ryder Cup. I mean, if I told you, I qualified for the Ryder Cup in 77 and 79. Unfortunately, in those days, you had to be on the tour for over 3 years and get your Class A PGA card because they set it up where the young guys couldn't come out and get a spot. It was the older guys. So you basically almost had to be on the tour almost 5 years before you could get on, because they only play it every other year. But we had Jack Nicklaus, Tom Watson, Johnny Miller, Lee Trevino, Ray Floyd, Tom Kite, Ben Crenshaw, Bill Rogers, Larry Nelson, um, uh, and me on the Ryder Cup. And other than Bruce Litsky, who died of glioblastoma, my brother-in-law, about 7-8 years ago, he won the U.S. Senior Open. He could really play. Bill Rogers won the British Open, was Player of the Year, and I won a U.S. Open. We're the only three guys on that team that didn't make the Hall of Fame. And of course, I couldn't make it because I only played 6.5 years. I didn't play long enough. I have won enough events and qualified on my wins in major championships to be considered. But there's no sense in being considered. I didn't have a Hall of Fame career because I didn't do it long enough. I was doing other things, and I've had a Hall of Fame career with my family and my business and my God. And when I had to step back and look at myself and say, okay, your golf game's gone. I mean, uh, you think about it. I mean, I finished 10th on the money list my first year, and then I finished 27th my second year with 2 wins. I had a hand injury in my right hand, and I think because my right wrist was bothering me, I started pulling more with my left side, and that's when I tore my left shoulder. I was a lanky, skinny kid, had loose shoulder joints, and I was good at hand-eye coordination sports, not all thick like a linebacker. I was more like a wide receiver or a lanky quarterback that could throw well. And so I had shoulder joints that just went out on me. Both of them. I had surgery on this one and 5 on my left and 1 on my right. But the crazy thing is when you get out there, you don't know how you're going to fit in. And your question really is about playing with those guys. I can remember watching Jack and playing with Jack. Before he hit, he kind of turned his head and he turned his left hand and he strengthened his grip. I mean, you would be playing and you'd be watching every move Jack Nicklaus made, and he's making a birdie, you made a par, he makes another par, you make a bogey, he makes a birdie, and you make a bogey, and you're going, wait a minute, I'm 2 over and he's 2 under. He's just beat me 4 shots in the first 6 holes, and you got to get focused back on you because you cannot play another person's game, and you cannot mimic their game. You have to play your own game, and as the old saying is, dance with the one you brung to the dance. You can't dance with all the girls. You got to play your own game. And Trevino had that left foot would tap, and he would open his stance, and he had this funky swing, and it was something that was so unorthodox. You could never teach the Lee Trevino swing. Tom Watson was strong, he looked like a prize fighter, had big forearms and was really in good shape. Tom took the club up, had it dead shut at the top, hit these big old hooks, and then he'd hit blocks and drive it all over the place, miss the green, chip it in or sink a 40-footer for a par, drive you crazy. I mean, the guy had probably the best short game on tour was Tom Watson when I was playing. And then in his time, he learned how to get the club in a better position at top, which he won even more golf tournaments, and then he played well on the senior tour. But Tom was a really good player and a great guy, and all the guys were great guys. People that used to say, who are the bad guys out there? There weren't any. You couldn't be a bad guy. If you were a bad guy, you would weed yourself out. Sure, there were probably maybe 1 or 2 guys you could say bad actors, but we were a bunch of gypsies living together on the road. There was no money to speak of, not like today. And I was once interviewed and said, when you go from the West Coast swing to Florida, we'd go from California and you'd play Doral. And what's the difference today as when you were? I said, well, when I was playing, you changed the oil in your car when you got to Florida. Today, they get a hot section on their jet engines. Every kid out there's got a private jet. It's crazy. I mean, Bubba Watson's caddy made more last year. He works for Scotty Scheffler now. He made more last year than I made my whole career. Scotty Scheffler won $63 million. I don't discount that that it's not, he didn't earn it, but I'm just saying is you can't even compare it. And I don't look back and say, oh, poor me or whatever. I couldn't care less. I've never done anything for the money, but it's remarkable and it's great that the game has grown to that level. I can remember Sam Snead, who won 82 or 84 times, telling me, you know, my average win was $1,000. I go, what? $1,000? $1,000 would be less than last place in the 80s or 70s and 80s. We had some $322 checks in the late 70s, but today it's a whole different sport because of just what we're doing today, the ability to market. People are looking for information, and what you're doing today is I'm providing information for people to see and hear and understand. People want to know what other people do. That's why sports are so big, because it's so obtainable to see any sport you want to see on TV, and people are willing to pay for it, and advertisers are willing to advertise. So golf was so much smaller. We only had a handful of tournaments. I bet we didn't have 20 tournaments were televised. There was no cable, and it was only on Saturday and Sunday, and it'd only be for like an hour and a half or 2 hours on Saturday and maybe 3 hours on Sunday till the conclusion of the event. The Masters didn't even televise the front nine until just a few years ago.
Yeah.
And now you can see everybody's shot, how far they hit it, where did the ball land, every divot, every whatever. It's crazy, and people are dying for information. I don't know if it's good or bad, but it's been good for the participants. The golfers have certainly done well.
It
Did
has.
did you how did the broadcasting come about? Like you said, you were a business major. Was it a seamless transition into broadcasting?
I never had a problem talking, and anybody would tell you that. Trevino and I would laugh. He was a big talker. Fuzzy talked a lot. Chi and Lee and I would play together, and he always was the king. I mean, you'd listen to everything he said, but I would throw my little pitchforks in there and jab him, and he'd go, "Yeah, when I played with Jerry," he and I were actually partners in the Ryder Cup, and that's an incredible story. When I played my first winning match, I played the first match and lost with Crenshaw, but I won with Lee. But Lee would say, "Yeah, when I play with Jerry, we have to raise our hand to see who gets to talk next." But broadcasting broadcasting came about because Frank Turkinian and some of the other producers had asked me, maybe not at ABC, but at NBC. Larry Cirillo was the producer, and he asked me to come into the booth occasionally. I could hold court in the locker room. They knew who could carry on a conversation and tell stories. And all broadcasting is entertaining. You want to tell people something they cannot see. That's the biggest problem with a lot of golf announcers is they'll say, "Oh, he hit that one too hard. Oh, it's short. It's uphill. Oh, he's not going to like that. It's in the water." Well, why not? Tell us why he's not going to like it. Tell us why did he hit it past the hole. Tell us, why did he come up short? I can remember my first Masters in '96 working for CBS. I was on the 14th hole. There's 7 foot of differential between the left side of the green and the right side. 7 foot of fall. You don't see that on TV. And a guy hits the ball 8 feet past the hole down the hill. I shouldn't say, "Oh, he hit that one too hard." I mean, really? He just knocked it 8 foot out. Why did he hit it? Well, nobody on television listening or watching would know, "Oh, the reason he hit it too far is going straight downhill, is falling down at probably a 4 or 5% fall. And there's Rays Creek, which is like a magnet that draws all the balls towards it, which is downhill. The whole property falls down to Rays Creek. And there's 7 foot of fall from the upper end to the lower. Now I've told somebody something they don't know. They're not looking at Rays Creek. They're not looking at the slope. You can't see the slope on TV. You really can't. The walk from the bottom of the hill, you come off the 18th tee at Augusta National to the bottom of the hill, and you walk uphill. I don't know what it is. I used to know all the facts, but it's probably 100 feet of walk up here. 100 feet. That's 10 stories. I mean, it is straight up a mountain. You don't see that on TV. When you walk from the second shot to the green, it's probably 25 feet up. And that last little bit's about 15 feet going just up the hill in front of the green. You see people walking up. Well, when you're coming up on Sunday and you're leading or about to win or you got a shot at winning, you don't even know you're going uphill. When you go out there and play Augusta National, if you've ever played it in a normal course of a round of golf, you'd go, "Wow, this is the hilliest course I've ever walked." So when you're broadcasting, you have to tell people something they cannot see. And that's really the trick to becoming a good broadcaster. And you have to go out and do homework and research. But I work for Terry Jastro, who is really a great producer. He was tough. I mean, he was actually almost mean to me, and I didn't care because you know, you got to think about it. He was also a roommate with John Mahaffey and John Grayson. I knocked off his two teammates in the U.S. Amateur and U.S. Open. He was on the same team with them at Houston, so he probably didn't like me for a long time. But he really was a great producer. Taught me a lot about business in the broadcasting world. Taught me about teamwork. You know, you're a golf professional as an individual. Now you got to work with 100 people for a week broadcasting. You've got to get out of yourself and you got to get into team. And that was really the biggest transition I had to make in life. Once I was injured, I had to get out of being Jerry Pate and just being another guy, and to fit into the system. And you know, again, I had me first, my family second, and my God third. And I woke up when I was in my 30s and I said, you know, I've got this all wrong. I'm selfishly living my life for me, vicariously trying to be somebody else and just be me. And so working at ABC Sports in 1988 was a humbling experience. I felt like I did a pretty good job for them. I worked 5 years. I worked with greats. I mean, greats. I worked with Jim McKay, who is the greatest at ABC Wide World of Sports. His son, Sean McManus, ironically, was my agent at IMG. Sean ended up hiring me, or actually Frank Chapinian hired me in 95 to work at CBS. Sean made the deal, and Sean became president of CBS Sports, and he became president of CBS. And he's now retired. He's a great guy. But I worked with some legends in the game. You know, Terry was really good, and we worked with Musburger, worked with Jack Whitaker, Bob Rosberg, Judy Rankin, Ed Snead. Worked with at CBS, I worked with Peter Oosterhouse. I worked with McCord. I worked with Costas. I worked with Billy McAtee. Worked with Bobby Clampett. Worked with Jim Nance. I was hired to take out Ken Venturi. I was taking out Ken Venturi. Nance replaced Pat Summerall. Pat went to work with John Madden over at Fox. And of course, we all had the same agents. Nance and Madden and I all had the same guys at IMG in New York, which was International Management, Mark McCormick's company. And McCormick was the guy that started Arnold Palmer, Jack Nicklaus, and Gary Player as their agent back in the 60s. So I had a great agent, and they always negotiated great contracts. But I had sort of a life-changing event at 40 in 1993. My wife and we ended up deciding I didn't want to be on the road with a bunch of guys. And then when I got hired back, and so I left working for ABC in 92, I guess it was. And then Chirkinian wanted me to come take Venturi's job because he was about 70. He needed to retire. And as it turned out, I worked 1 year and then quit. And but then they brought me back, and I did about 10 events the next couple of years. Then later on in 2000, 99, 2000, I worked with Peter Allis at the BBC and did the Scottish Open, the British Open for 3 years, and had a good run there. Enjoyed it. You know, that was enough to go over and do 2 weeks in Great Britain. But it was an opportunity I could have probably still been announcing. I did not want to be on the road with my family at home. I wanted to be home with my family. So that's when I got more involved in different businesses like building golf courses, designing and building golf courses, owning golf courses. You know, I've been in a lot of different businesses, and then I got in the turf and irrigation business, and now back owning golf courses again. I think I've lost my mind. I bought a couple of golf courses, great golf courses over in Mississippi, Old Waverly and Mossy Oak. I bought it with about 10 guys, and we're having a good time with that. But
Well,
you know, I've had an eclectic life, and but I'll say this to listeners: never do anything for the money. I had an incredible contract with CBS, and when I told Sean McManus I was not going to work anymore, he says, "Well, you have a contract, you can't quit." I says, "I'm quitting. My wife didn't want me to do this, and I hope y'all don't get mad at me. But you got the best contract, you know, we've go." In fact, David Faraday had just come to work at CBS, and he was the craziest guy I'd ever met. And he took these meetings and he'd just say things off the wall. I said, "This guy's a nut from Ireland." And I didn't really know him when he played the European Tour, and he didn't really play much on the PGA Tour. And then 2 years later, he came to me, he says, I was drunk the whole time. I guess, no way. He said, oh, yeah. He said, I was drunk all day long and I want to apologize. And he said, I've changed my life. And my wife and I both made a decision to stop drinking. And when we were both 40, and I was living in Birmingham and building an old opening club. And it just came to our attention. That's not what we wanted to do to lead a better life. And we wanted to get closer to our God and our faith, and we're both Catholics. I grew up in Presbyterian church in Alabama, but when I married a Catholic, you know what that means. You're either going to be a Catholic or you're not going to stay married very long. But so I have a great wife. We've been married coming up on 50 years this year. But Faraday was the wildest guy I'd ever met. And then he went on to build an incredible brand and a career and left CBS and went on his own. And now I think he's over on the Live Tour. I would imagine he's doing it because he's doing it for the money, because there ain't nobody watching the Live Tour. I've never even watched one time and I turned it off. It didn't represent the kind of golf that I grew up watching. But television was fun, but it was also sort of sad for me. I would say sad because I was not able to be out there on the road with my wife and my kids. And what was more important to me, being out there with a team of 75 technical people and cameramen and broadcasters, or being with my wife playing on the tour. And my tour days were over. My shoulder was still giving me a fit. And so I went into television and broadcasting.
Well, that concludes part one of our episode with Jerry Pate. I hope you're enjoying this episode. Please be sure to tune in next week as we conclude our interview with Jerry Pate on the Cart Barn Podcast. Thanks again for listening.